My honest story from Arizona, my son David said. The shed will work fine for now, Mom. I spent 3 nights shivering out there before I served him with legal papers that changed everything. Her light always brings the truth forward. And tonight, my truth needs to be told. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever been treated like a burden after years of sacrifice, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because every story shared here matters, and your support helps other women find their voice when they need it most. My name is Margaret Rose Thompson, and at 71 years old, I never imagined I would be sleeping on a rickety cot surrounded by rusted lawn equipment and dusty Christmas decorations that hadn't seen daylight in 5 years. The concrete floor beneath me radiated cold that seeped through every blanket, every layer of clothing, every attempt at dignity I tried to maintain. But that is exactly where my son, David, and his wife, Jennifer, decided I belonged after my minor heart episode 3 months ago, tucked away, like a broken appliance they couldn't quite bring themselves to throw out, but didn't want cluttering their perfect home. It is just temporary, Mom. David had promised when he drove me from the hospital to their sprawling ranch house in Scottsdale, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I had started recognizing more frequently. Just until you get back on your feet. We want to keep an eye on you. His hands gripped the steering wheel as he spoke, knuckles white, eyes focused straight ahead rather than meeting mine in the rearview mirror. I believed him. After 38 years teaching high school English in Tucson, wrestling with Shakespeare and teenage angst in equal measure, I thought I understood the subtle meanings hidden beneath surface words. I had spent decades decoding the real messages in student essays, parent conferences, and administrative doublespeak. But David's version of keeping an eye on me turned out to mean hiding me where visitors couldn't see the inconvenient reminder of his mother's increasing frailty. The converted garden shed behind their house became my world, all 8 feet by 12 feet of it. The space had originally housed Jennifer's pottery hobby before she discovered that creating beautiful things required more patience than she possessed. Now it contained my existence. A folding cot with a mattress thin enough to feel every metal support bar. A small table David had salvaged from their garage sale pile, and a plastic chair with a crack running down the back that pinched my skin whenever I shifted position. No insulation against the desert cold that people don't expect Arizona to have in December. The temperature could drop into the 30s at night, turning the metal walls into conductors that drew every bit of warmth from my aging bones. No air conditioning for the brutal heat that everyone knows Arizona does have heat that would transform this space into an oven by 10 in the morning, making the air itself feel thick and poisonous. Just a space heater that David claimed was temporarily out of order and needed parts he would order when he had time, and a battery-powered camping lamp that cast eerie shadows across the gardening tools hanging on rusty hooks like instruments of torture in some medieval dungeon. That first morning, I woke with my joints screaming from the thin mattress and my breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The arthritis in my hands had flared from the cold, making my fingers feel like twisted branches. I wrapped my grandmother's wedding ring quilt around my shoulders, the only comfort item I had been allowed to bring. The rest of my belongings deemed too much clutter for their minimalist aesthetic, and tried to convince myself this arrangement would improve. The quilt still carried faint traces of my grandmother's lavender sachets, a scent that transported me back to childhood afternoons, spent learning embroidery stitches and life lessons in equal measure. Through the small window, grimy with years of neglect and spiderwebs, I watched Jennifer's morning routine in the kitchen. She moved gracefully between the granite countertops, her silk robe flowing as she performed her daily coffee ritual with the expensive espresso machine I had helped purchase for their housewarming 5 years ago. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances and pendant lighting that cast everything in a warm, golden glow, a sanctuary of comfort and abundance, while I rationed the lukewarm water from the thermos David had grudgingly provided, carefully measuring each sip to last the entire day. No invitation to join them for breakfast at the farmhouse table where I had shared so many holiday meals. No knock on the door to check if I had survived the night or needed assistance with my morning medications. No acknowledgement that a human being existed in their backyard, suffering through conditions they wouldn't inflict on their landscaper's tools. By noon, when the Arizona sun transformed the shed into an oven, and I could feel sweat pooling beneath my clothes. Despite the thin walls' inability to retain any heat from the night before, I understood with crystalline clarity that my presence in their home wasn't temporary. It was unwanted. I was being stored like seasonal decorations, brought out only when absolutely necessary and otherwise forgotten in the dark corners of their property. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and undeniable. I wasn't their beloved mother and grandmother anymore. I was a problem to be managed, a burden to be minimized, an inconvenience to be hidden from their carefully curated social circle. I had raised David as a single mother after his father abandoned us when David was 8 years old, walking out one Tuesday morning with nothing but a suitcase and a note claiming he needed to find himself somewhere that didn't include the responsibilities of a wife and child. The coward never even said goodbye to David, just disappeared like smoke, leaving me to explain why Daddy wouldn't be coming home for dinner anymore. I worked double shifts at Roosevelt High School, teaching English literature during the day, and tutoring struggling students after hours for extra money. I graded papers until midnight, my red pen moving across essays about dreams and futures, while my own dreams sat dusty on the shelf. I coached the debate team for free because David wanted to join and we couldn't afford the fees. I took summer jobs cleaning offices and teaching summer school to afford his college textbooks, his debate team travel expenses, his graduation suit that made him look so handsome and proud walking across that stage. When he graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State with a business degree, shaking hands with the dean, while I cheered from the audience with tears streaming down my face, I felt like we would both succeeded. All those nights of peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, while his tuition payment consumed our grocery budget, had been worth it. All those times I had said no to dates, no to vacations, no to anything that might divert resources from his education, had finally paid off. I had sacrificed my youth, my social life, my own career advancement to ensure his success, and for 20 years afterward, he had been the perfect son calling weekly, visiting for holidays, introducing me proudly to his friends, as the woman who made it all possible. I had attended his wedding, held his babies, provided the down payment for this very house we sat on now. Now, sitting in his garden shed with dust motes, dancing in the thin streams of sunlight that managed to penetrate the grimy window, I wondered where that grateful young man had gone. When had I transformed from his hero into his burden? When had love turned into tolerance, and tolerance into outright hostility? The second evening brought a devastating revelation that answered those questions with brutal clarity. The shed shared a thin wall with their family room, where they spent their evenings watching television on the enormous screen I had helped finance for their anniversary last year. Sound carried through the gaps around the old electrical outlet, voices floating to me like poison through the darkness. I had been lying on the cot, trying to find a position that didn't aggravate the constant ache in my lower back, when I heard Jennifer's voice, sharp with the particular irritation she reserved for discussing anything related to my existence. "She has been here almost a week. David, this was supposed to be short-term." The words cut through the wall like knives, each syllable precise and cold. "I know, babe, but what else can we do? We cannot just dump her somewhere." David's response carried none of his usual confidence. He sounded tired, worn down by the burden of having to consider my welfare. "Why not? She is not our responsibility anymore. We tried the family thing, but she is cramping our style. Marcus and Lisa are coming for dinner Friday, and I don't want them knowing your mother is living in our backyard like some vagrant." The casual cruelty in her voice made my stomach clench. To Jennifer, I wasn't a person with feelings and dignity. I was an embarrassment that might damage their social standing. Marcus and Lisa, their country club friends, who always complimented them on their beautiful home and perfect life, must never know about the inconvenient elderly woman tucked away behind the pool house. David's response came slowly, thoughtfully, and with a calculating tone that chilled me more than the concrete floor ever could. "The lawyer said we need documentation, that she cannot care for herself before we can pursue conservatorship. If she stays out there long enough, maybe she will slip up. Forget something, get confused, give us what we need. My breath caught in my throat. Conservatorship. They weren't just hoping I would become more manageable, they were actively working to have me declared incompetent, so they could control my assets, my medical decisions, my entire existence. How long is long enough? Jennifer asked, her tone suggesting this was a conversation they had had before. A plan they had been developing while I believed they were helping me recover. Dr. Morrison thinks another month in rough conditions might create the cognitive decline we need to prove incompetence. Then we can take control of her assets legally. David's voice carried no emotion, no guilt, no recognition that he was discussing the systematic destruction of his own mother's mental health for financial gain. And if she doesn't decline naturally? Jennifer's question hung in the air like a threat. Then we help it along. Confusion about medications, missing appointments, small accidents that suggest she cannot manage independently. The court just needs a pattern of incompetence. I pressed my hand to my mouth to muffle the gasp that escaped. They weren't just waiting for me to deteriorate, they were planning to orchestrate my decline, to manufacture evidence of incompetence, to systematically destroy my autonomy and dignity for money. I stepped back from the wall, my hands trembling, not with cold but with a fury, so pure it felt like electricity coursing through my veins. They weren't just cruel, they were calculating. They wanted me to deteriorate, so they could claim guardianship of my pension, my savings, my small house in Tucson that I had planned to leave to David anyway, believing he would cherish it as the symbol of our family's perseverance. But they had underestimated their opponent. 38 years of teaching teenagers had taught me patience, strategy, and the absolute importance of documentation. 38 years of dealing with manipulative parents, dishonest administrators, and bureaucratic systems had honed my ability to gather evidence and present it effectively. These children thought they were playing chess with a woman who only knew checkers. They were about to discover their mistake. The next morning, I began my counter-offensive with the methodical precision I had once used to plan semester curricula and grade final exams. Hidden in my purse was the smartphone my former student Sarah had insisted I learned to use during my retirement party 3 years ago. "Mrs. Thompson," she had said, pressing the sleek device into my hands with the same intensity she had once brought to analyzing Hamlet's soliloquies. "You never know when you might need to record something important. The world is changing, and sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to have proof of what really happened." Sarah had been one of my brightest students, a young woman who would overcome poverty and family dysfunction to earn a full scholarship to journalism school. She had kept in touch over the years, sending cards and updates about her career, always crediting me with teaching her to question authority and seek truth behind comfortable lies. Now, sitting in this shed with her gift in my hands, I realized Sarah had been more prescient than either of us could have imagined. I activated the voice recording app she had helped me install and positioned the phone near the wall outlet where the sound carried clearest. Then I waited with the patience I had developed through decades of dealing with adolescent behavior and administrative incompetence. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Jennifer's sister Brandy visited, bringing with her the kind of casual gossip that would cement the evidence I needed. Through the wall, their conversation unfolded like testimony in a courtroom trial I was building against my own family. "God, Jennifer, you are really keeping her in the shed. That is hardcore, even for you." Brandy's voice carried a mix of admiration and shock, as if she were discussing an impressive but questionable home renovation project, rather than the systematic abuse of an elderly woman. "It is not permanent. We just need her to decline enough mentally that we can get power of attorney. David's mother has almost $200,000 in retirement accounts, plus that house in Tucson. We could really use that money for the European vacation we have been planning." Jennifer's response was matter-of-fact, discussing my financial assets like items in an estate sale catalog. What if she doesn't decline? What if she just stays sharp? Brandy's question carried genuine curiosity, as if she were asking about the likely success of a stock investment. Jennifer's laugh chilled me to the bone, a sound devoid of warmth or humanity. The laugh of someone who had moved so far beyond empathy that another person's suffering had become merely an inconvenience to manage. Trust me. A month in that heat and cold will break anyone. And if it doesn't, well, accidents happen to old people all the time. Heat stroke, falls, medication mistakes. The beauty of it is that everyone expects elderly people to decline, so no one questions it when they do. I stopped the recording with shaking fingers, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it echoing in my ears. The casual way she discussed my potential death, the calculated cruelty disguised as practical planning, the complete absence of any recognition that I was a human being with rights and dignity. It was all there, captured in digital clarity. I saved the file immediately and backed it up to the cloud storage Sarah had helped me set up, my fingers moving with the muscle memory developed through years of typing lesson plans and student evaluations. Evidence, clear, incontrovertible evidence of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. But I needed more than recordings. I needed allies, people with the power and knowledge to help me escape this trap before they could spring it completely. That evening, after Jennifer and David had retreated to their bedroom with their bottle of wine and their complete indifference to my welfare, I called my closest friend from my teaching days. Linda Martinez had retired. The same year I did, but instead of enjoying leisurely golden years, she had thrown herself into social work, specializing in elder advocacy through the Arizona Department of Economic Security. Maggie. It is almost midnight. Are you okay? Linda's voice carried immediate concern, the tone of someone accustomed to crisis calls and emergency situations. I told her everything, the shed, the conversations I had recorded, the systematic plan to destroy my mental capacity for financial gain, the casual discussion of accidents and medication errors. Linda listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disgust and anger that told me she understood exactly what I was describing. When I finished, her voice carried the steel I remembered from our days handling difficult parents and uncooperative administrators. The tone that had made her legendary among teachers for getting results when everyone else had given up. This is textbook. Elder abuse, Maggie. Financial exploitation, neglect, conspiracy to commit fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I know people, good people, who don't tolerate this garbage and have the power to shut it down immediately. Can you get to a phone tomorrow around 10 without them overhearing? I think so. They usually sleep late on weekends. And I can walk down to the mailbox where there is better cell service. Good. I am calling Judge Patricia Valdez first thing in the morning. She owes me a favor, and she has zero patience for family members who exploit seniors. We are going to shut this down before they can cause any more damage. Linda, what if they retaliate? What if making legal trouble just makes them angrier, honey? They are already planning to destroy your mental health and possibly kill you for money. How much worse can it get? Sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to shine a bright light on what they are doing. The next morning, while David and Jennifer slept late on their memory foam mattress in their climate-controlled bedroom, probably dreaming about European vacations funded by my suffering, I spoke with Judge Patricia Valdez. Her voice carried the authority I remembered from the few times our school district had dealt with legal issues involving student welfare and mandatory reporting. Mrs. Thompson, based on what Linda shared and the recordings you have described, I am prepared to issue an emergency protective order, but I need you to file formal charges and provide the evidence directly. Are you prepared to do that? Yes, Your Honor. I have everything documented. Good. I am connecting you with an attorney who specializes in elder abuse cases. Her name is Rosa Santos, and she has helped hundreds of people in situations like yours. She is expecting your call within the hour. This ends today. By noon, Rosa had reviewed my recordings through the secure file transfer system she used for sensitive cases, and was preparing paperwork with the efficiency of someone who had seen these patterns too many times before. Her voice on the phone carried both compassion and steel. Margaret, what you have documented is crystal clear evidence of multiple felonies. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to endanger. Your son and daughter-in-law are looking at serious criminal charges, not just civil penalties. By 3 o'clock, we had filed a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services, petitioned for an emergency restraining order, and initiated a criminal investigation through the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office. Rosa had connections throughout the legal system, built through years of fighting for seniors who couldn't fight for themselves. By 5 o'clock, Judge Valdez had signed orders removing David and Jennifer from any access to my financial accounts, authorizing an immediate welfare check, and freezing any assets they had attempted to transfer from my accounts without my knowledge. Rosa, how quickly will this move? I asked during our final phone call of the day, standing by the mailbox in the evening desert air that felt like freedom compared to the stifling atmosphere of the shed. Very quickly. Judge Valdez takes elder abuse cases personally. Her own grandmother was exploited by family members, and she has made it her mission to protect seniors from predatory relatives. Emergency protective orders can be served within hours when there is clear evidence of immediate danger. At 6:30 that evening, I heard vehicles in the driveway, not just one car, but several. Through the shed's small window, I watched 2 police officers, a social worker, and a deputy from the court system approach the front door with official documents and the kind of purposeful stride that suggested serious legal business. David answered in his workout clothes, clearly annoyed by the interruption of his evening routine. I could see his face clearly through the window, and I watched his expression change from irritation to confusion to dawning horror as he realized this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. David Thompson. I am Officer Rodriguez with Scottsdale PD. We have a court order for an immediate welfare check regarding Margaret Thompson. There must be some mistake. My mother is fine. She is staying with us temporarily while she recovers from her health issues. David's voice carried the smooth confidence he used in business meetings, the practiced charm that had served him well in his career. Sir, we need to see Mrs. Thompson immediately. Where is she currently residing? Officer Rodriguez's tone suggested he had dealt with plenty of smooth-talking family members who thought they could charm their way out of elder abuse investigations. I watched David's face pale as he realized the gravity of the situation, watched him calculate whether lies or truth would serve him better in this moment. He pointed toward the shed with a trembling hand, his confident facade crumbling. She is in the guest quarters, out back. It is temporary, just until we can make better arrangements. The social worker, a kind-faced woman in her 40s named Miss Chen, according to the badge she wore, let her professional mask slip for just a moment, revealing disgust that quickly transformed back into clinical assessment. The shed, sir? You are housing a 71-year-old woman recovering from cardiac issues in an uninsulated garden shed during winter. Her voice carried the kind of controlled anger that suggested she had seen too many variations of this same story. Before David could fabricate another explanation, I opened the shed door and stepped into the evening air. I held my head high and walked toward the officers with the same dignity I had used walking into faculty meetings for decades, the same composure I had maintained during parent conferences with the most difficult families. Officers, I am Margaret Thompson. I assume you are here about the complaints I filed today. Miss Chen assessed my living conditions with professional thoroughness, photographing the cot, the space heater, the complete lack of adequate sanitation facilities, the gardening tools hanging overhead like a safety hazard waiting to happen. Officer Rodriguez documented everything, his camera flash illuminating corners of the shed that hadn't seen proper light in months. Mrs. Thompson, you are being housed in conditions that violate several health and safety codes. This appears to constitute elder neglect at minimum, with additional evidence suggesting financial exploitation and conspiracy to commit fraud. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with panic and anger, her silk robe flowing behind her like the wings of an angry bird. She had clearly been listening to the conversation and calculating how to minimize the damage to their reputation. This is ridiculous. We were helping her. She cannot live alone anymore after her heart attack. We were just trying to keep her safe. I turned to her with the calm authority I had once used to address disruptive parents during conferences. My voice carrying 38 years of experience dealing with people who confused manipulation with persuasion. Jennifer, I recorded your conversation yesterday about hoping I would develop cognitive decline so you could steal my assets. I also recorded your discussion with your sister about accidents happening to elderly people who don't cooperate. Would you like me to play those recordings for these officers? The color drained from her face so quickly, I thought she might faint. David stepped forward, his business training kicking in as he tried to regain control of a situation that had clearly spiraled beyond his management abilities. Now wait just a minute. Whatever my mother thinks she heard, she has been confused lately. The heart medication affects her thinking. We are just trying to help her. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, cutting him off with the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with people who thought they could talk their way out of legal consequences. David and Jennifer Thompson, you are both being served with temporary restraining orders. You have 1 hour to pack essential items and remove yourselves from this property. Mrs. Thompson has legal right to return to the main house, and you are prohibited from any contact with her pending investigation. This is our house, David protested, his voice rising with panic and indignation. We have lived here for 10 years. You cannot just kick us out based on some confused old woman's accusations. Miss Chen checked her paperwork with the thoroughness of someone who had dealt with similar protests many times before. Actually, sir, according to county records, your mother is listed as a co-owner on the deed. The arrangement you have described constitutes financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and your mother's recorded evidence suggests conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. I had forgotten about that detail until Rosa mentioned it during our legal consultation. When David bought the house 10 years ago, he had needed my name on the mortgage to qualify for the loan amount required by their dream home aspirations. I had signed the papers thinking I was helping my son achieve his goals, proud to contribute to his success story. Instead, I would unknowingly retain ownership rights that would now protect me from their scheme to steal my assets while destroying my mental health. By 8 of the clock, David and Jennifer had packed bags with the frantic energy of people who had suddenly realized their carefully constructed life was collapsing. I watched through the window as they loaded suitcases into their BMW, their faces pale with shock and growing awareness of the legal consequences they were about to face. As they drove away toward whatever hotel would accept them for the night, I walked into our house and immediately turned up the air conditioning. The sudden warmth felt like absolution, like redemption, like the first breath after nearly drowning. I made myself a proper cup of coffee with their expensive espresso machine, using the imported beans they kept in the freezer for special occasions. I sat at the granite kitchen counter I had helped finance and looked around the home that had been built partially with my money, but had excluded me from its comfort. For the first time in a week, I was warm, comfortable, and safe. But more importantly, I was no longer powerless. But I wasn't finished building my case. The next morning, Rosa Santos called with an update that filled me with the kind of satisfaction I had once felt watching struggling students finally grasp complex literary concepts. Maggie, we have been busy overnight. Adult Protective Services opened a formal investigation with emergency priority status. The district attorney is reviewing the recordings for potential criminal charges, including conspiracy, elder abuse, and attempted fraud. And your son's employer received a formal notification about the investigation apparently. Several clients have been asking for different account managers. David worked for a prominent wealth management firm that handled retirement accounts for high net worth individuals. Trust and integrity were essential to his career, and any suggestion of financial impropriety or elder abuse would make him a liability they couldn't afford to keep. There is more, Rosa continued, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had spent years fighting for justice and finally seen it delivered efficiently. Jennifer's nursing license is under review by the state board. Apparently, Demonstrating callous disregard for elderly welfare violates their professional ethics standards, regardless of whether the victim is family or patient. I felt a flicker of satisfaction mixed with sadness. They had tried to destroy my life to steal my money, convinced that their victim was too weak and isolated to fight back. Instead, they had destroyed their own careers and reputation through their arrogance and cruelty. Over the following weeks, their carefully constructed social circle began to crumble as news of the abuse investigation spread through their community. The country club they had joined, using my financial assistance, quietly suggested they might be more comfortable at a different facility. Jennifer's book club stopped, including her in their weekly meetings. David's golf partners started avoiding him at the 19th hole, but the most meaningful consequence came from an unexpected source that reminded me why I had chosen education as my life's work. My former student Sarah, now a successful investigative journalist for the Arizona Republic, called me 3 days after the restraining order was served. "Mrs. Thompson, I heard through the courthouse grapevine about what happened. Would you be willing to talk to me about your experience? This story needs to be told, and you are the perfect person to tell it. Sarah, I don't want to become some kind of victim poster child. I just want my life back. That is exactly why you should tell your story. You are not a victim, you are a survivor who fought back successfully. You could inspire other seniors who are going through similar abuse to recognize they have options." Her article, titled, "Retired, Teacher Turns Tables on Family Who Betrayed Her," became one of the paper's most shared stories of the year. Sarah had captured not just the facts of my situation, but the broader pattern of family-based elder abuse that often goes unreported because victims are afraid of damaging relationships or don't know they have legal recourse. The response overwhelmed me completely. Letters poured in from across Arizona and beyond, dozens every day for weeks. Former students sharing memories of how I had supported them during difficult times. Other seniors describing similar treatment from their own families. Adult children expressing horror at David and Jennifer's behavior and vowing to examine their own treatment of aging parents. One letter particularly moved me. It came from a woman in Pittsburgh named Dorothy, who had spent 6 months sleeping in her basement while her son's wife told people she was traveling to visit relatives. Dorothy had seen my story online and contacted a lawyer the same day. "Your courage gave me permission to stop being polite about my own mistreatment," she wrote. "I am now living in my own apartment again, and my son is in therapy trying to understand how he let his wife manipulate him into abusing his own mother. I sat at my desk each evening with a cup of tea and my grandmother's fountain pen, replying to as many letters as I could. It became a ritual that grounded me, connected me to a community of women who, like me, had waited too long to speak up about their mistreatment." Meanwhile, back in Scottsdale, the legal and social consequences for David and Jennifer continued to unfold, with the inexorable momentum of justice finally finding its target. The church they attended held a private meeting of the board of directors after reading the local news coverage and receiving a wave of concerned calls from congregation members. Michael, once the chairman of their community outreach board, was quietly removed from his leadership position. He violated the moral trust we expect of our stewards. Their pastor later told me during a compassionate phone call to check on my welfare. "We cannot have someone leading charity work who exploits his own mother for financial gain." But the most devastating blow to their comfortable life came the following week, delivered with the clinical precision of a legal system that had finally been activated on behalf of a vulnerable senior. An investigator assigned by the Arizona Department of Economic Security launched a comprehensive review of my case, including detailed analysis of the recordings I had submitted and interviews with neighbors who had witnessed my treatment. As part of the inquiry, Rachel's parental capacity was evaluated, especially after the quote she had given during that recorded conversation with her sister. "The garage is the only place she can die and not inconvenience anyone." That line appeared in nearly every news story about the case, becoming a symbol of the casual cruelty that often characterizes elder abuse within families. Rachel argued it was taken out of context, but context couldn't save her from the implications of wishing for her husband's mother's death for convenience. The court issued a temporary suspension of her custodial rights to her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, my granddaughter. The child was placed with Rachel's sister pending further evaluation of the home environment and Rachel's fitness as a parent. Rachel's screams echoed down the courthouse hallway that morning, a sound of anguish and disbelief that carried through the marble corridors like the cry of someone finally facing consequences for choices they had believed would never catch up with them. I didn't go to watch the proceedings. I didn't need to see her suffer to feel vindicated. Rosa called me afterward and simply said, "It is done. She is out of the picture for now, and Emma is safe with people who understand what appropriate care looks like." There was no satisfaction in seeing a mother lose her child, but there was justice in seeing a woman held accountable for thinking another woman's life was disposable. There was also relief in knowing that Emma would be protected from the toxic environment that had produced such casual cruelty toward a family member. Later that month, I was asked to speak at a seminar organized by the Arizona State Bar Association titled "Power in Quiet Resistance: Legal Remedies for Elder Abuse." I stood at the podium facing an audience of lawyers, social workers, and advocates, some young and eager, some gray-haired and experienced, all leaning forward like every word mattered. I began with the truth that had sustained me through the darkest moments in that shed. I am not loud. I was never the loud one. I took notes. I scheduled hearings. I organized the truth into neat folders and handed it to men who got the credit for my work. But I never forgot how to speak. I just waited for when it mattered most. The audience was completely silent. The kind of attention I had only achieved in my classroom when discussing the most powerful passages of literature. They put me in a shed and called it temporary housing. They discussed my death like a convenient solution to their financial problems. But I recorded their cruelty and I gave it to justice, not for revenge, but because someday another woman might be in a shed with no coat and no hope. And I want her to know she is not alone. The crowd rose to their feet with an ovation that lasted several minutes. I didn't smile wide or take a bow. I just nodded my head in acknowledgement, grateful that my story had found people who understood its importance. When I returned home that night to the house that was finally, legally, completely mine, I looked around at the rooms that had been denied to me, the kitchen where I had been unwelcome, the living room where I had been discussed like a problem to solve rather than a person to respect. No velvet sofas or granite counters could compare to the simple satisfaction of safety and autonomy. I now lived in my own space, made my own decisions, and controlled my own destiny. That night, I called Emma at her aunt's house. We talked for an hour about school, her friends, her confusion about why Mommy was crying all the time, and why she couldn't come home yet. "Grandma, are you okay now? Mommy said you were sick and needed special care." "I am fine, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make mistakes about what other people need, but I am safe now, and I want you to know you can always call me if you need anything. Can I come visit you sometime? I miss you, absolutely. We will have tea parties, and read books, and do all the things grandmothers and granddaughters are supposed to do together." For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt hopeful about the future rather than simply relieved about surviving the present. 2 months after the protective order was issued, I received an unexpected call that would transform my experience from personal vindication into professional purpose. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Maria Gonzalez from the Arizona Elder Rights Foundation. We have been following your case, and we would like to offer you a position as a senior consultant. Your experience and your legal background make you uniquely qualified to help other seniors recognize and escape family-based financial exploitation." The foundation handled cases across the Southwest, providing legal assistance, counseling, and advocacy for seniors who were being abused or exploited by their own family members. They needed someone who could relate to victims' experiences while also understanding the legal system well enough to guide them through complex proceedings. "Your case is perfect," Maria explained. "During our meeting the following week, you documented everything properly. You fought back successfully, and you are articulate about what happened without being bitter or vindictive. You could help so many people who are going through what you experienced." I accepted immediately. The work gave my experience, meaning beyond personal justice. Every case I consulted on, every senior I helped find their voice, every family member I helped hold accountable felt like a small victory against the cruelty I had experienced in that shed. My first case involved a 78-year-old man named Robert, whose daughter had convinced him to sign over power of attorney so she could help manage his affairs. She would immediately moved him into a nursing home and sold his house, using the proceeds to fund her new business venture. Mrs. Thompson, I feel so stupid for trusting her. She is my daughter. I raised her. How could she do this to me, Robert? Intelligence has nothing to do with it. Love makes us vulnerable to people who should protect us. But love without respect isn't really love. It is manipulation. We worked together to build a case that ultimately restored his assets and resulted in criminal charges against his daughter. Watching him sign the lease on his new apartment, seeing him regain control of his own life, reminded me why this work mattered. 6 months later, I testified before the Arizona State Legislature in support of stronger elder abuse laws, joining a panel of experts advocating for better protections and more severe penalties for family-based exploitation. I told them about the shed, the recordings, the calculated cruelty of my own son. I watched legislators taking notes, asking questions, promising action to protect other seniors from similar treatment. Family loyalty, I concluded, cannot be used as a shield to protect financial predators. When we allow sentiment to override justice, we enable the kind of abuse that destroys families and devastates vulnerable seniors. The Elder Protection Enhancement Act passed unanimously 3 months later, creating stricter reporting requirements for suspected elder abuse and increasing penalties for family members who exploit senior relatives. Meanwhile, David and Jennifer's lives continued to unravel as the full consequences of their choices played out in both legal and personal spheres. David lost his job when his employer decided they couldn't risk the liability of keeping an employee under investigation for elder abuse. His professional reputation in the financial services industry was destroyed. Word travels fast in small professional communities, and trust is everything in wealth management. Jennifer's nursing license was permanently revoked after the ethics board determined that her recorded statements demonstrated a fundamental disregard for human dignity that made her unsuitable for healthcare work. They divorced 6 months after the protective order was issued, their marriage apparently unable to survive the pressure of legal consequences and social ostracism. Jennifer moved back to California to live with her mother. David found work at a small insurance agency, earning a fraction of his former salary. David tried to contact me several times after their initial court-ordered separation. He sent flowers with cards claiming he had made mistakes, but still loved me. He left voicemails insisting their treatment had been misunderstood, and that he wanted to work things out. I didn't respond to any of his attempts at contact. Rosa had advised me that any communication could complicate the legal proceedings, and honestly, I had no interest in hearing his excuses or apologies. Actions have consequences, and some mistakes cannot be repaired with flowers and phone calls. Instead, I focused on building my new life from the foundation up. The house in Scottsdale was too large and too filled with painful memories. I sold it and used the proceeds to purchase a comfortable condominium near my old school, close to friends who remembered my worth and colleagues who respected my contributions. My days now involved consulting on abuse cases, mentoring other seniors through legal proceedings, and occasionally guest lecturing at Arizona State University about recognizing family-based exploitation. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. Every morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own home, surrounded by books and photographs and memories that belonged to me. I made coffee in my own kitchen and planned my day according to my own priorities and values. It was a simple life, but it was authentically mine. No one could take it away again because I had learned the difference between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and financial exploitation, between helping someone and controlling them. Recently, a young teacher at Roosevelt High School asked me to speak to her students about standing up to bullies. I agreed, but modified her request slightly to address what I knew these teenagers really needed to understand. Today we are talking about recognizing when people who claim to love you are actually trying to harm you. I told those bright-faced students, who reminded me why I had chosen education as my life's work. And we are talking about what courage really looks like, when you are facing people who have power over you. I told them about the shed, about recording conversations, about refusing to disappear quietly when others wanted me gone. I explained how manipulation often looks like care, how isolation can be disguised as protection, how love should never require you to accept less than you deserve. Courage isn't always loud, I explained, looking at faces that showed me they understood exactly what I meant. Sometimes it is methodical. Sometimes it is patient. Sometimes it is simply refusing to accept treatment you don't deserve, even when that treatment comes from people who should love and protect you. A young girl in the front row with wise eyes that reminded me of myself at that age raised her hand. "Mrs. Thompson, weren't you scared to fight back against your own son?" I considered her question carefully, wanting to give her the most honest answer possible. Terrified, I admitted. But I was more scared of disappearing without a trace. I had spent my whole life teaching students to think critically, to question authority, to stand up for what is right. I couldn't abandon those principles when my own life depended on them. After class, several students approached me privately. They shared stories about parents who controlled their money, siblings who manipulated their emotions, relatives who made them feel small and powerless. They spoke with the hesitant voices of people who had been taught that family loyalty meant accepting mistreatment silently. I gave them the same advice I give everyone who contacts me through the foundation. Document everything. Trust your instincts, and remember that healthy relationships require mutual respect to remain valid. Love doesn't hurt, I told them. Real love makes you feel safer, not more vulnerable. If someone claims to love you while treating you badly, they are lying about the love part. That evening, I called Sarah, my former student, who had become my journalist ally and one of my closest friends, to tell her about the school visit and the conversations with students. "Mrs. Thompson, you have become exactly what you always were, a teacher. You are just teaching different lessons now to people who need them even more than those high school students did." She was right. I was still teaching, but now my classroom was courtrooms and legislative chambers and foundation offices. My students were seniors who had forgotten their own strength, and young people learning to recognize manipulation before it destroyed their futures. And my curriculum was justice, self-respect, and the fundamental truth that no one has the right to exploit or abuse you, regardless of their relationship to you. The most profound change in my life wasn't the legal vindication or the professional recognition. It was the peace that came from living authentically for the first time in decades. For years, I had defined myself through my service to others. I was David's mother, my student's teacher, the family member everyone could depend on to sacrifice her own needs for theirs. I had confused selflessness with virtue, service with self-worth. Now I understood the difference between chosen generosity and expected exploitation. I helped people because I wanted to, not because I had no choice. I gave my time and energy to causes that mattered to me, not to family members who saw my resources as their entitlement. Most importantly, I was no longer afraid. Fear had kept me silent in that shed. For 3 days, fear of being ungrateful, fear of causing family conflict, fear of acknowledging that the people who claimed to love me were actually trying to harm me. Now I understood that being afraid of the wrong people is worse than being alone. And being alone isn't actually frightening when you genuinely respect your own company and trust your own judgment. 2 years after the shed incident, I received an unexpected call that would test how completely I had moved beyond the pain of my family's betrayal. David wanted to meet for coffee, against Rose's advice, but following my own instincts about closure and healing. I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a Starbucks near the university where I sometimes lectured. The choice felt appropriate, a public place associated with my new life rather than our shared history. David looked older when he walked through the door, worn down by the consequences of his choices. His hair had thinned, his face carried new lines, and his eyes held the wariness of someone who had learned that actions have lasting consequences. "Mom, I need to apologize. Really apologize, not just say words that might make things easier for me." I sipped my latte and waited, curious to see if he had actually learned anything from the destruction of his life, or if this was just another manipulation attempt. "I convinced myself we were helping you, that you couldn't make good decisions anymore, that we knew better than you did about your own needs. But really, I just wanted your money. And I was willing to destroy you to get it." His honesty surprised me. I had expected excuses, justifications, attempts to minimize his responsibility. "Jennifer and I are divorced. Lost the house. Obviously. I work at a small agency now. They were the only ones willing to hire me after everything came out in the industry publications. I deserve all of it." "Yes, you do," I agreed calmly, without anger or satisfaction. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve to ask for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I am ashamed of the person I became." I studied his face carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: genuine remorse and what appeared to be authentic self-reflection. "David, I appreciate you saying that. It doesn't change what happened, but it matters that you understand the impact of your choices. Can I ask, are you happy? I mean, with your life now?" I smiled for the first time during our conversation, thinking about my work with the foundation, my comfortable home, my independence and peace. Happier than I have been in years. I wake up every day knowing exactly who I am and what I am worth. No one questions my competence. No one treats me like a burden. No one tries to make me disappear. I help people. I am respected in my field. And I sleep in my own bed every night surrounded by things I choose to keep. "I am glad," he said quietly. "I am sorry. It took losing you for me to understand what I had thrown away. You didn't lose me, David. You discarded me. There is a significant difference between those two things." He nodded, accepting the correction without argument or defensiveness. Will you ever consider having a relationship again? Not like before, but maybe something new." I set down my cup and looked at him directly, choosing my words carefully. "David, I spent 71 years being the mother, teacher, and caregiver everyone needed me to be. I sacrificed my comfort, my money, my peace of mind to support other people's dreams and goals. Now I am focused on my own dreams, my own work, my own happiness. I understand. If you want to prove you have changed, don't prove it to me. Prove it to someone who still has faith in you. Find someone who needs what you have to offer and give it freely, without expecting anything in return. That is what real love looks like. It builds people up instead of tearing them down for personal gain." We parted cordially, but without plans to meet again. I drove home feeling neither angry nor sad, just resolved and clear about my boundaries. Some relationships cannot be repaired, only replaced with healthier connections built on mutual respect, rather than obligation and history. These days, my calendar stays full with work I find deeply meaningful. Yesterday I helped a 78-year-old man recognize that his daughter's money management assistance was actually systematic theft disguised as care. Last week I testified in court for a grandmother whose grandson had isolated her from friends to control her disability payments and Social Security income. Tomorrow, I am speaking at a conference for social workers about spotting financial exploitation within families and understanding the psychological tactics abusers use to maintain control over their victims. It is challenging work that often requires me to relive my own experience, but it feeds my soul in ways that grading papers and managing classroom discipline never could. Every case I help resolve, every senior I help find their voice, every family member I help hold accountable feels like a small victory against the cruelty and helplessness I experienced in that shed. My new life isn't perfect. No life is, but it is authentically mine. I answer to no one except my own conscience. depend on no one except myself, and trust my own judgment above all others. Most importantly, I am no longer afraid of the future or dependent on other people's approval for my sense of worth. Fear was what kept me silent in that shed for 3 days. Fear of seeming ungrateful, fear of causing family conflict, fear of acknowledging that the people who claimed to love me were actually planning my destruction. Now I understand that being afraid of the wrong people is far worse than being alone. And being alone isn't actually frightening when you genuinely enjoy your own company and trust your ability to make good decisions. The shed is gone now. The new owners of David's old house demolished it to install a swimming pool with a waterfall feature. Sometimes I drive by just to see the empty space where I once spent 3 nights learning who I really was underneath all the roles I had played for other people. It looks peaceful now, filled with clear blue water instead of gardening tools and desperation. Children play in that water, their laughter echoing across the yard where I once shivered and planned my escape. But I am grateful for those 3 nights now. They taught me that survival is not the same as surrender, that patience is not the same as passivity, and that love never requires you to accept less than you deserve from anyone. Most importantly, they taught me that the strongest people are often the quietest ones until the moment comes to speak up for themselves or others who cannot speak. And when that moment comes, we don't just speak. We document, we plan, we gather allies, and we use the system to protect ourselves and others who are vulnerable. We roar with the voice of justice itself. If this story touched something deep inside you, if you recognize the cold feeling of being dismissed by people who should cherish you, if you have ever felt like a burden in your own family, please know with absolute certainty that you are not alone. Here at Her Light, we illuminate the stories that others want to keep hidden in dark corners. We speak for the women who have been silenced by shame and obligation. We stand with the seniors who have been discarded, like inconvenient furniture. We support the family members who have been exploited by people who confused love with ownership. Your story matters more than you know. Your voice carries power even when it feels small. Your truth deserves to be heard and believed and acted upon. Subscribe to Her Light because every subscription tells the world that we refuse to disappear quietly into the shadows where abusers prefer to keep us. Share this story because somewhere tonight, someone is shivering in their own version of that shed, convinced they have no options and no hope. Show them they are wrong. Show them that we exist, that we survived, that we fought back and won. Remember, you are never too old to fight back, never too dependent to demand respect, never too isolated to find allies who will help you reclaim your dignity and your voice. Hit that subscribe button. Share your own story in the comments, if you feel safe doing so, and let's keep shining light into every corner where cruelty tries to hide behind family loyalty, because the truth always finds a way to surface. Justice never has an expiration date, and we never stop fighting for each other.